Buddhism for Today, The Essential Wisdom of the Threefold Lotus Sutra by Nikkyo Niwano. Part 2, The Sutra of the Lotus Flower of the Wondrous Dharma. Chapter 9, The Assurance Given to Those Trained and Still in Training. In this chapter, the Buddha gives assurances of Buddhahood to many disciples, including Ananda and Rahula. Ananda, a cousin of the Buddha, was the younger brother of the cruel disciple Devadatta, who was at first a follower of the Buddha, but later left the Sangha and even attempted to kill Shakyamuni Buddha. Unlike Devadatta, Ananda was a kind-hearted person who became a disciple of the Buddha in childhood, and always accompanied the Buddha at his side, attending to Shakyamuni Buddha's needs until his passing. Hence, he is often referred to as Ananda, the Buddha's personal attendant. Rahula was the actual son of the Buddha, conceived before Shakyamuni renounced home life and went forth to seek awakening. The Buddha foresaw that Rahula would be a person of superior ability and summoned him from the palace to join the Buddha's disciples when he was 15 years old. To prevent Rahula from assuming that he was due special treatment as the Buddha's son, Shakyamuni placed Rahula under the care of Shariputra, another of the 10 great disciples. The phrase, still in training, that appears in the title of this chapter, refers to the stages on the way at which one must continue pursuing religious learning. Conversely, trained refers to the stage at which one has graduated, gone beyond learning and the need to undertake religious exercises. Having seen many arhats receive assurances of Buddhahood, Ananda and Rahula remain the only two of the Buddha's direct disciples who have not received assurances, and this makes them feel left out and disheartened. They brood so intently on their omission, imagining how delighted they would be to receive an assurance of Buddhahood, that it inspires them to rise from their seats, go before the Buddha, revere him by bowing at his feet, and address him together, saying, "World-honored one, will you not also give us your assurance of Buddhahood? We have taken refuge in only the Buddha. This means we have devoted ourselves to and depend on you. The living beings of the heavenly realm, human realm, and the realm of Asuras all acknowledge us as disciples of the Buddha, and recognize us as Ananda, your attendant who is constantly by your side, protecting and preserving your treasury of teachings, and Rahula, the Buddha's actual son. If the Buddha would only give us assurances of Buddhahood, not only would our own wishes be fulfilled, but the hopes of many would be realized." 2,000 disciples who were trained, as well as those still in training, rise from their seats, bare their right shoulders together, to demonstrate their humble sincerity, and then go before the Buddha. All with the same resolve, they place their palms together in reverence, and gazing up at the world-honored one, as they stand there in line, hold in mind the very same wish as Ananda and Rahula. Seeing this, the world-honored one immediately grants their wish, for he has already decided to give both of them assurances of Buddhahood. First, the Buddha tells Ananda that he will pay homage to 62 million Buddhas and help all of those Buddhas transmit their teachings to later ages, keeping their treasuries of teachings and helping pass them on to posterity. Afterward, he will attain the enlightenment of a Buddha, supreme perfect awakening, leading innumerable bodhisattvas to attain the very same enlightenment. The world-honored one gives that Buddha the name King of Unhindered Wisdom, vast as mountains and oceans, Tathagata, and names his domain Banner of Victory Always Raised. A banner of victory is, as its name indicates, a flag that symbolizes triumph. There were many schools of philosophy in ancient India, and they often engaged each other in debates. The custom was to raise a victory banner at the gate of the residence of a scholar priest who had defeated an opponent in religious debate. The domain name Banner of Victory Always Raised affirms that the teachings of the Buddha, King of Unhindered Wisdom, vast as mountains and oceans, will be everywhere and always the most excellent. That Buddha's lifespan will be immeasurable thousands of millions of myriads of kalpas, and his teachings will continue in the world for twice the duration of his lifetime. The innumerable Buddhas throughout the universe will extol the merits of the Buddha, King of Unhindered Wisdom, vast as mountains and oceans. 8,000 novice bodhisattvas in the assembly. Novice meaning people who have newly resolved to practice and become a Buddha in order to liberate others. Witness Ananda's assurance of Buddhahood and become perplexed, because Ananda had received a far more impressive assurance than even the great bodhisattvas. Knowing what those bodhisattvas are thinking, the world-honored one speaks to them, responding to their doubts by explaining, "In our past lives, Ananda and I learned the Dharma together from the Buddha, King of Emptiness, and we both resolved at the very same time to attain the enlightenment of a Buddha. But Ananda and I practiced the Dharma differently. Ananda wished to hear and learn as much of the Dharma as possible, while I strove to practice by actively carrying out the teachings as best I could. The reason I attained Buddhahood before Ananda is merely this small difference. Because of these karmic conditions from his former lives, Ananda has become my disciple in this lifetime. He will protect and uphold the treasury of my teachings and transmit them to others, and he will also protect and keep the treasuries of the teachings of future Buddhas, teaching multitudes of bodhisattvas to transform themselves and assure that all of them bring their cultivation of practice to complete accomplishment. Outwardly, Ananda may appear to seek only much learning, and so everyone in the assembly assumes that he must be a Shravaka, apprenticing in the way as a kind of intellectual pursuit. By protecting and keeping the treasury of the Dharma of the Buddhas in order to help bodhisattvas complete themselves is actually Ananda's original vow, and for this reason I give him an assurance of Buddhahood. The difference that the Buddha identifies between the progress of Ananda's practice and his own is very important to us. Shakyamuni Buddha taught the principle that awakening is found in putting the teachings into active practice by offering himself as the indisputable real-life example. In this passage, Shakyamuni Buddha makes it clear that the hands-on practice of benefiting others is the pinnacle of religious faith. Vows. Original vow. The term original vow appears here in the text of the sutra, and this calls for a consideration of the place of vows in Buddhism. Nowadays, we tend to use the word vow or pledge quite casually and without much thought, but a vow in the truest sense is not something made so lightly. To vow originally means to establish an ideal for oneself and then devote one's entire life to realizing it. In the Buddhist context, of course, our ideal is to benefit others. The desire to attain Buddhahood does not become a vow unless we make it for the purpose of liberating others from their suffering. This vow to benefit others is the most essential aspiration of people who practice Buddhism, and for this reason it is called a Buddhist's original vow. Universal vows. In Buddhism, there are two kinds of bodhisattva vows, universal vows and special vows. Universal vows are the vows that all Mahayana Buddhists share. The common wish of all Buddhists is to study the teachings of the Buddha and eliminate their delusions. Our aspiration is also to attain awakening in order to benefit many other people. This wish is a universal vow, and it is further subdivided into 4 parts, which are called the 4 universal vows of a bodhisattva. The 4 vows are discussed in detail on page 232. Special vows. A special vow is a specific vow made according to one's individual character, abilities, and vocation. Here are some examples. Because I am a talented painter, I will make the world as beautiful as I can by creating beautiful paintings. Because I am a gifted musician, I will use music to give people peace of mind. Because I am a farmer, I will benefit society by raising the best quality crops as possible. If I become a merchant, I will improve the lives of my customers by providing the highest quality goods at the cheapest price possible. These are all excellent examples of special vows. In addition to the universal vow to liberate all living beings, each of the Buddhas has their own special vows, such as the 48 vows of Amitabha Buddha and the 500 great vows of Shakyamuni Buddha. We too should all make at least one special vow and work to fulfill it throughout our lives. The purpose of a human life is to strive to fulfill such a vow, which enriches the experience of our daily lives. In this way, Buddhism teaches us not only a noble ideal that is timeless, but also one we can pursue while living everyday lives in the real world. Thus, Buddhism is a holistic teaching that speaks both to the very profound and to that which is familiar and close at hand. Of course, merely making vows is of no use. We must practice to fulfill them. Our vows must never be made as half-hearted gestures, nor should our efforts be half measures. Once we have set our minds on a vow, we should be enthusiastic and determined to carry it out no matter what the cost. If we do so, we will certainly fulfill our vows. Pessimists think that when it comes to real life, we hardly ever realize our dreams. This is a mistaken assumption. If we make a concentrated effort over a long span of time, there is no doubt that we can ultimately achieve our vows. We should understand what an enormous amount of energy an earnest vow generates. When we remain focused on even a supposedly impossible goal, striving continually to realize it, we can make the impossible come true. Humankind has already shown it can accomplish great things by reaching for the stars through the development of spaceflight. In the same way, we will surely fulfill our vows if we remain true to our convictions and make tireless efforts to realize them. This is what the Buddha teaches us. Unseen practices. After giving Ananda his assurance of Buddhahood, the world-honored one next gives an assurance of Buddhahood to Rahula. The Buddha gives him the name One Who Walks on Seven Jeweled Flowers, Tathagata, telling him that he will serve a number of Buddhas equal to the particles of 10 worlds ground to dust, and always become the eldest son of each of those Buddhas, just as he is in this life. The beauty of that Buddha's domain, the duration of his lifespan, and so on, will be the same as those of King Unhindered Wisdom, vast as mountains and oceans, Tathagata, the future name of Ananda that was revealed when Ananda was given his assurance of Buddhahood. Then, in order to restate what he had just said, the World-Honored One speaks in verse, which I quote directly from the text of the sutra. When I was a royal prince, Rahula was my eldest son. Now that I have accomplished the Buddha way, he inherits the Dharma as my Dharma child. In future lifetimes, he will meet immeasurable millions of Buddhas as eldest son to them all, and single-mindedly seek the Buddha way. Rahula's unseen practices are known to me alone. His manifestation of himself as my eldest son is for the eyes of living beings. His immeasurable millions of hundreds of thousands of merits are impossible to count. Steadfastly, he abides in the teachings of the Buddhas, seeking therein the unsurpassable way. These lines are so filled with the Buddha's affection for Rahula as both a Dharma parent and a father that it can move us to tears. How delighted Rahula must have been when he heard the Buddha say, Rahula's unseen practices are known to me alone. Unseen practices refers to the method of refraining from outwardly revealing your degree of awakening, instead naturally leading people in a better direction while mingling with them as an ordinary person. This approach is essentially the same as the principle of half a step discussed above. Though Rahula had attained a high degree of enlightenment, without showing even the slightest hint of it, he silently guided people from behind the scenes. Only Shakyamuni Buddha knew the full truth of Rahula's unseen practices. For Rahula, the Buddha's recognition must have brought him a twofold joy. Teaching and transforming those closest to us. Why did Shakyamuni Buddha give assurances of Buddhahood to such worthy disciples as Ananda and Rahula much later than to others, in spite of their accomplishments? We might imagine that the Buddha had the following reasons in mind. Ananda was the personal attendant of the Buddha, and Rahula was his own flesh and blood, making both of them the disciples closest to the Buddha. The Buddha must have considered the possibility that rather than being positive, this closeness to him would have a negative influence on their practice, and in order to demonstrate this to his disciples and those of us who read the Lotus Sutra today, the Buddha intentionally deferred the assurances of Buddhahood for both Ananda and Rahula. Therefore, we should not jump to the conclusion that the Buddha delayed assurances for these two disciples closest to him out of any deference to his other followers. Shakyamuni Buddha was certainly not that sort of person. For someone like Ananda, who is always at the master's side and waiting on him personally by cooking his meals, looking after his health, preparing his bath, and taking care of all his various needs, it could be difficult to distinguish between the greatness of Shakyamuni Buddha and the magnificence of his teaching, and Shakyamuni, the man of ordinary human form. This complication would naturally have made it harder for Ananda to achieve the same sincere devotion as the other disciples. The same is true of the relationship between parent and child. No matter how great the parent, their own children will find it hard to regard them with the same respect that outsiders do. In this passage, the Buddha teaches us that unless people in the same situation as Ananda and Rahula make a clear distinction between public and private matters, such closeness to their teacher will actually hinder their practice. While Ananda and Rahula were both placed in this difficult position, the account of their outstanding conduct that appears in this chapter is a testament to the excellence of their virtues. To look at this in another way, those closest to us, such as our spouses, partners, children, or parents, are by far the most difficult to lead to the Dharma. As long as we try to guide them merely with words, we will never be completely successful. Our only alternative is to influence them through the conduct of our daily lives. If we normally behave in an unethical manner and often act selfishly, showing integrity only occasionally, we will fail to have an influence on those around us. Unless we constantly set a good example for our family members, they will not be interested in following our lead. Shakyamuni was showing this to us by delaying the assurance of Buddhahood for both Ananda and Rahula. At this time, as the World-Honored One looks upon the 2,000 people, both those trained and still in training, their images are reflected in his eyes, all of them gazing up at the Buddha attentively, with pure, gentle, and flexible minds, unswayed by the circumstances around them. The Buddha addresses Ananda asking, "Do you see these 2,000 people trained and still in training?" Ananda answers, "Yes, I see them." This short exchange between the Buddha and Ananda is precisely the kind of communication that occurs in what Buddhism calls transmission from mind to mind. The Buddha's question obviously means, "How do they look to you?" And Ananda replies, "Yes, they are outstanding." In other words, Ananda is able to perceive that all these people are ready to receive assurances of Buddhahood. The world-honored one then addresses the 2,000 people, giving the group an assurance of Buddhahood. The Buddha tells them that they will all serve innumerable Buddhas, protecting and keeping the treasuries of their teachings, and that all of them will have the same name, attributes of treasures Tathagata. Hearing this, all are ecstatic, and together, in the final lines of the last verse in this chapter, they address the Buddha with these words as an offering of gratitude to him. "The world-honored one is a bright lamp of wisdom. On hearing you give voice to our assurance of Buddhahood, our hearts are brimming with joy, as if showered with sweet dew." This short but famous verse, directly quoted from the Threefold Lotus Sutra, is so full of praise and gratitude to the Buddha that we should be inspired to read and recite it every day.